in the area. There is a slide which talks about the projects that we believe may be necessary for recertification of the levees. They are throughout the levee system. However, it is worth noting that the most expensive of those projects may be the reinforcement of the railroad grade at the west end of the districts, which was the place where the failure occurred in 1948, which destroyed the city of Vanport. And lastly, there's a slide there which talks a little bit about where we're going from here. So very briefly, we have currently a feasibility study going on that is being funded by the Army Corps of Engineers. It will actually get to a place where, with local input, will get us to a recommended number of projects and types of projects that need to be done for recertification. We are hopeful that ultimately, when that study is completed, those projects can be submitted for potential federal funding, or at least a share of the funding can come from the federal government, potentially. At that time, we would know more about what the local obligation would be. Also, as pertaining to that district I was referring to, there are pieces of legislation now at the state legislature which have been submitted that will be under consideration for the formation of an entirely new district to modernize the way we govern and the way we pay for both the protection of the levee system in the future and also the internal workings within the levee. There's a lot of pumping that has to be done, lots of piping and conveyance of both waters within the levee system, but also some surface water that goes into the levee area. With that, I think I would say that the reason the city of Portland needs to be so involved in this and needs to continue to participate is that, A, we believe it will take a number of years to both form a new district, put a new finance system in place, and be able to do the work that's necessary for recertification of the levees. Secondly, of all of the lives, property value, ecological value, and essential infrastructure that's protected by the levee, the vast majority of it exists within the city of Portland. And so, regardless of how this all plays out at some point in the future, the city of Portland has a lot at risk behind the levees. And so, another reason for us to be involved. With that, Mr. Mayor, you have the materials. I'd like to stand ready to answer any of your questions, and certainly the folks from Levee Ready Columbia would be happy to do so also.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty has the first question.
Thank you so much. My question is very short, sweet, to the point. We're going to create new districts, and who pays for that?
Right. There is a bill before the legislature which would create a new, I'm forgetting the name as I speak.
Water Quality and Flood Safety District.
Thank you. It is a new district under Oregon State statute. It would have the authority to create a utility, and that's the key for the power of this new district. The current funding mechanism under the existing districts is an assessment on property value. That assessment has been deemed a Measure 5 tax. And therefore, what happens is, because of the low value of public property within the districts, read Heron Lakes Golf Course, for instance, because it has very low real market value because it's not usable for any other use, therefore it goes into compression very quickly, and the financial burden is shifted to other properties, predominantly private properties within these districts. The money that would need to be raised to do the capital work on the levees, if it had to be raised under the current system, would not only be beyond the capacity of those districts to raise the money, but the more they raise, the more inequitably the money is charged to individual properties. We've looked at this for about 2.5 years now and believe that a utility model is the most fair way to allocate the overall maintenance and construction costs for these things. And so the statute before the legislature would not create the utility. It would create the district with the authority to look into a utility. There would be a transition period with an appointed board, which would go through all the methodologies and machinations of seeing how can you fairly allocate these costs through a utility. And only when they found that could be done successfully would there be an elected board elected, and they would hold an election, and the elected board would be able to actually operate the utility over the long term. I hope that makes some degree of sense.
Oh, it did. It
Okay.
actually made a lot of sense, but you still didn't answer my question,
I'm sorry.
like who's gonna pay for it? So basically, what you're trying to do is spread the cost out through a lot more stakeholders than currently pay for it, right?
In essence, yes. And I can give you very briefly what we've been talking about, because it really would be the transitional board's job to really nail this down. The folks who live inside the levee system now in the floodplain, they would carry still the bulk of the burden for operations and for capital. However, we would look to potentially spread some of the costs burden for the management of surface water that comes off the uplands and into and has to be conveyed to the Columbia River. We would look to transfer some of that cost to those folks. I might add that within the city of Portland, that cost is already being transferred. The Bureau of Environmental Services pays the drainage districts a little over $600,000 a year for that conveyance cost. So it really would not necessarily be a transfer, because if in fact the utility transferred those costs, we would stop paying that $600,000. So it would be one way or the other for the city of Portland. Other jurisdictions, however, do not pay that kind of a conveyance, and so some challenges there. The third level of cost would be looking at a general obligation bond, which would have to be voted upon, of course, that would transfer the just capital portions of the cost to renew the levy certification, those capital costs, to all of the district's property owners, which would be Multnomah County within the urban growth boundary. That's the proposed boundary for the district.
I love this stuff. So
I'm glad you do.
Commissioner Fritz.
So just to follow up on that, let me make sure I've got this straight, that for this particular,
Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Fritz.
I think I know who gets the environmental services next. Not me.
I can also tell it's late in the day.
come on, Tim, we can get through this. The 233,590, the council in previous years has set aside some money for these intergovernmental agreements, and we've got about 800,000 left, of which, so this is coming out. But we do anticipate there will be some other overhead costs coming in the next several years that we won't have enough money for, and so the budget office will put that into our forecast. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, for the record, Tom Reinhardt, Chief Administrative Officer, that is a correct summary. In the assessment and evaluation they did for your packet, we discussed with them that we did have enough money in the carryover from special appropriations previously, that they would have to build out the additional costs in the 5-year forecast.
And to be clear, it's not the general special appropriations that we hand grants over. It was a specific, this is for the levy, this is the amount we're going to put in this bucket, but it's going to live in special appropriations.
That's correct. And to council's credit, since council has been methodically supporting this over years, that has been in the queue. It's in the city budget office. They're prepared for this. There is an expectation that we will want to continue this relationship per your direction.
Can I get some idea of the time frame, or do we know?
For the entire IGA, it's through 2024 is what the IGA is for. However, if in fact, let's just say the legislation were to pass this session for the new district, transitional board gets formed, and everything goes pretty well, we could definitely be transitioning to a new district and the IGA would become moot, maybe within 3 or 4 years, I don't know. That just depends on how quickly you can move through those other steps.
Tom, obviously we would not bear the entire cost of the project as estimated in the slide deck, but we would bear some significant portion of that cost. What is our plan as far as reserving
great question. I'm glad you asked it. And for the record, full transparency, I did not see the question. Chief Financial Officer Cooperman sat here a few months ago and worked with council on a long-term financial plan, beginning steps of it. You may or may not recall that CFO Cooperman said this was in one of the columns of long-term liabilities that we really need to get our hands around, and that we need to have a process for what the capital contribution would be. We don't have that yet. Director Jordan and I are working with a group to try to figure that out, but it's the right question for now that we have to start planning for what those capital costs would be. You can see on the percentage allocation that we are really winners in terms of the land percentage of potentially impactful lands being 80% in the city of Portland. We're bearing 40% of the IGA costs.
Right, but this isn't our only call on geo funds.
No, it isn't. It isn't.
Quite a few other.
We are going to have to figure out exactly what our capacity is, and we're going to have a long-term plan for it.
But we should know what our capacity is now. And we obviously don't know what the liability side of the ledger is, but we should have some sense of what our capacity is.
Yeah, our debt capacity is always a percentage of real market value. So I'm confident that we will have the capacity. The question then becomes debt service and the vehicle through which we pay that debt service, which in this highly competent group is helping us figure out.
See, Commissioner Hardesty, this is the part that really excites me. I think we can get some partnership.
Oh, by all means, keep the
work it out.
questions coming.
We can work
This
it
is
out. No, those
fascinating.
were my questions.
It's after 5, but I've got all night.
Very good. Yes, it's been a long day. It's been a long day. It's not a nerd-friendly end of the day subject. Any rate, but that is really my main concern. I actually trust the process we're engaged in. I trust our partners in Levee Ready Columbia. I think it's a great vehicle. We had the win, obviously, with securing the funding for the feasibility study. It makes logical sense that we would continue this next phase with the understanding that we're reserving this out of the budget capacity going forward. But you know, I still at some point want to close the window of speculation a little bit around our bonding capacity in the time frame we're presuming this will happen in the 4 to, I'll be optimistic, the 4 to 6 year time frame. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And Tom, that's a great segue into, you're going to be coming and we're going to be having that conversation sometime soon, right? About just really what our bonding capacity is and kind of what the debt load is, so that as a council, we can actually look at the big picture as compared to doing these things in silos.
Correct. As part of a long-term financial plan scenario for the council to consider.
I look forward to that conversation. Thank you so much.
Great. Public testimony on this item.
Yes, we have 2 people signed up, Edith Gillis and Lightning.
Use your 2 minutes wisely.
The
And
2
for the
minutes
record.
was 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes for the last speaker. This is completely unreasonable.
So I'd like to make sure that when you're looking at this, that you're considering both the different influences on levee stability and longevity, as well as on those who put us at the most risk and those who have the most capacity to pay, and to be careful of the conflicts or the catch-22s where we have a vested interest to raise the tax rate on different folks. I would like that to be correlated to the dangers that they give to the levee and to our civilians and our environment, and at the same time that we need to have a lot of bioremediation. We need to have a lot of natural areas to absorb the water and to not have overdevelopment, and that's not necessarily taxable, but is of a great value for us. I would like us to tax more Southern Pacific, because the railroad has a lot of that vibration with the oil bomb trains that can explode and destroy the levees. And I think it should also include that they are upstream from us, and if they destroy Bonneville Dam, that's going to really do a lot more harm than our levees are designed to take care of. Also, we have to be looking at the different explosive chemicals that are being stored and used along the levee, because when those explosions happen, the levees will not be able to stand. I would like us to make sure that we additionally have bioremediation, that we have native plants along the way, and that we take care more of